Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar on how to eliminate tool sprawl without causing a rebellion, sponsored by LogicMonitor. I'm Katie D, online and social media editor at SD Times, and to kick things off, I just wanted to mention a few quick housekeeping items. This webinar will be recorded and available for on-demand viewing on sdtimes.com around 24 hours after the session. LogicMonitor will also be accepting live audience questions during today's talk, so feel free to send any of those through the chat. Today, we will learn about what drives tool sprawl and why ops teams are struggling with it, challenges companies face when maturing their monitoring practices, and recommendations for how to solve these challenges. Now, to dive deeper into this topic, let's turn it over to today's speakers, Taylor Coppock, Product Marketing Manager at LogicMonitor, and Sabrina Fiden, Senior Product Marketing Specialist at LogicMonitor. Thank you guys so much for being here today.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Today, let's talk about how to eliminate tool sprawl without causing a rebellion. So for the next half hour or so, we're going to cover a few things on this topic. We'll cover some of the drivers behind tool sprawl and why ops teams struggle with this. We'll discuss the challenges companies experience when maturing their monitoring practices, and finally, some recommendations for how you can solve these challenges. But before we get started, we want to introduce ourselves and LogicMonitor. LogicMonitor's SaaS-based unified observability platform, Element Vision, helps IT ops and DevOps teams and business leaders gain operational visibility into and predictability across the modern IT environments that organizations depend on to deliver stellar employee and customer experiences. Element Vision enables visibility across infrastructure, networks, cloud containers, and applications, empowering companies to focus less on troubleshooting and more on innovation.
Thank you for kicking that off, Taylor. So I wanted to begin with prefacing the data we're going to present throughout the next couple of slides. LogicMonitor teamed up with 451 Research to conduct surveys to generate these data-driven insights for our webinar today. So let's begin. The biggest driver for tool sprawl right now is new technologies that are making their way into the IT environment. And a lot of the times, the response from an operations standpoint is to add additional tools in order to get that good visibility into all of these new technologies. As part of a DevOps survey we conducted, we asked what kind of cloud-native technologies are important to DevOps implementations. And you can see here that microservices is the top answer, followed by containers, serverless, server mesh, and Kubernetes. That's a lot of technologies that comes into an organization. This question was specifically around DevOps implementation, as we are seeing DevOps continue to be adopted heavily and broadly and very quickly. Next, let's look at really just the impact that these technologies have once they're adopted. Let's look at an example at just containers at Google. Google launches 4 billion containers per week, and you can see the breakout here. That equates to 571 million containers a day, 24 million containers an hour, 6,600 containers a second. Google has a massive web presence Google has a massive web presence, but this shows a good description of the complexities that can be contributed to an application just around a container. And that's not to mention other technologies and also other practices, approaches, and architectures. Let's look at Hulu. They have 1,000 microservices that are being supported by 100 teams. And as you can see, that adds a lot of complexity. All of this generates a really enormous volume of IT operations data. Segment is another interesting company. They say that they have the potential to collect 33 billion different time series data points. So this is just to give you an idea of what a modern cloud-native large application environment can look like. And so the obvious kind of knee-jerk reaction is just to throw more tools at it so that you can both get a better visibility into your environment and to better manage these environments. So let me kick it over to Taylor to talk more about what that DevOps implementation looks like.
So the DevOps survey asked, what were the most important tools and products companies often include in their DevOps implementation? And it's pretty interesting when you look at the wide distribution of results. A lot of companies chose many options from the list, of course, like CI/CD, to build tools, to test automation. But it was interesting to see monitoring come up second in terms of the important tools for DevOps. This is one example of tool sprawl occurring within monitoring, but also tool sprawl more broadly when running DevOps. Now, this is another fun visual I'd like to share. This is an example of what tool sprawl can look like within DevOps. Zebia Labs created this periodic table of DevOps tools, and it includes a few examples of monitoring options, but it shows just what else exists among these teams. Even today, reports and conversations with our customers confirm that companies are still running up to 30 or 40 monitoring tools within their organizations across all teams. So it's definitely an issue that people are struggling with in their day-to-day. So why is tool sprawl such a big problem for organizations? First off, if you're running so many tools, it leads to poor collaboration across ops teams. Each monitoring tool is probably owned by a specific team and might be monitoring only certain data across the stack. Now, this data might indicate something differently when viewed in isolation, and this misalignment makes it difficult to work together across ops teams to have a single view into the why behind a performance problem in modern IT environments. Tool sprawl also results in outages or slowdowns in services. If you're running so many tools with siloed data, you can't correlate data into how the problems are related and cannot identify the root cause of the performance problem or how to respond and resolve the issue. Also, tool sprawl creates a missed opportunity for IT ops to advance their use case across organizations. Some companies who do centralize the view of performance might be able to discover that if you can correlate the big picture of IT environment with business outcomes, you can better understand how application performance problems might be impacting the customer experience and your bottom line. So these are some really interesting use cases that I begin to see when some companies reduce their tool sprawl and unify their IT ops data.
So now that we have understood the risks related to tool sprawl, let's look at some recommendations as to not cause that rebellion. First, there is unifying ops data and solving that problem around collaboration. Now, there are a number of different approaches you can take, and you don't need to get rid of every single monitoring tool and whittle it down just to one. But you do need to be thoughtful about which tools are of value and which ones can go. Which tools can really be brought together to be able to correlate and analyze that data. Next is to be thoughtful about changes to tooling. You don't want to walk into an organization and say, oh, we're shutting down your tool. A great practice that we recommend is starting off with one group within the organization and positioning them as the poster child to demonstrate to other colleagues. Additionally, at very large or fast-growing organizations, a lot of times teams are selecting tools based on their immediate team's requirements. So that creates some sort of silent information in terms of how the tool is being selected. And to avert that, it's important to have a cross-functional view of who and what the other team needs are to be able to make decisions based on those consolidated requirements. Next is making sure leadership sets the goal. Having the leadership set the goal or set a target over a period of time by how many tools you as an organization are trying to reduce does help. For example, in a situation where you are trying to reduce 50% of your tools over 2 years, it does help align everyone's thinking and helps bring everybody together and really question the tools in use and make sure that everyone has that cross-functional view and understanding. Last is to consider an organizational model. And this can have a real impact, and we'll walk through this within the next couple of slides. But overall, understanding the tool throughout your organization and the cross-functional requirements and setting targets for, what percent you're trying to reduce really has that impact. So next, we'll look at the IT ops evolution. I want to talk a little bit about that organizational models that I mentioned, because this actually can have a real impact on your approach to monitoring and your approach to IT operations in general. A lot of organizations start in a traditional model where they have an ops team, a development team, and they are beginning to embrace DevOps. But what often happens during this phase is, especially if you're an enterprise and you have dozens or more DevOps teams, there's a little bit of chaos that may ensue. And in part, that's often because those teams are usually allowed to autonomously choose whatever tools they want, including monitoring tools. And this is where you would begin to see a lot of that tool sprawl. So you see this increase in tools, and most organizations recognize this, and they begin to shift into a more modern approach. A lot of times what that involves is repurposing the IT ops team to become more of an observability team. And that team begins to manage the monitoring tool and the relationship with the vendor and becomes really that expert at getting the most out of the monitoring tool. So they're serving that up like a service to the DevOps teams who are using those monitoring tools while also monitoring their applications that they're building. And this can have a lot of benefits. So centralizing that expertise can be really helpful. And for the future state, which tends to be really more about automation, and a lot of times this evolution through these phases occurs along with the adoption of increasingly abstract tools. So if you're in this maturing phase, it's really important to centralize that IT ops data. And Taylor will walk us through that and a little bit more about what that process looks like.
Yeah, so some more data from the survey. As companies are evolving their IT ops model and going through that maturity phase, there is some chaos and some tool sprawl naturally across the organization. So shifting to a model with a centralized IT ops team isn't too big of a leap. Right now, our data show that over 70% of the respondents are running a centralized process within their ops teams, where a single core team provides the majority of the IT functions for all business units. And in the next slide, you'll see that, in fact, these companies do not expect to change this operation model. The survey asked how likely the organizations were at changing their IT ops team's process, and almost 80% said the structure is not expected to change over the next few years. A small percentage are moving to a centralized ops process, while a few are shaking it up by moving to distributed IT ops. But the majority are going to be well positioned to use a centralized IT ops team as a sort of center of excellence, a team that can really take control of the monitoring tools to reduce the sprawl. And this IT ops model can serve as a real point of knowledge and expertise through digital transformation. So what does a centralized IT ops process mean for the development teams? The survey asked how developers spend their time, and the results showed that 55% of the time is spent maintaining and managing applications, and only 42% of the time is spent developing something innovative that's really going to drive the business forward and bring value, and not just maintaining something that already exists. Now, I'm sure the respondents would prefer the numbers to be flipped, and I like to believe that if centralized IT ops can help to solve the challenges of juggling tools, of managing tools, and relearning all the monitoring tools, then hopefully these developers and DevOps teams could spend more of their time innovating and driving the business forward. Finally, it's more important than ever that organizations take control of their services and offerings to maximize customer experience. There is another recent consumer survey published that asked people how likely they were to switch a brand or provider if the app or service they were using was buggy, slow, or otherwise performed badly. And 79% said they're either very likely or somewhat likely to switch. That likelihood of switching obviously directly impacts the bottom line. So performance is becoming increasingly important for IT ops teams to focus on. And now Sabrina has a few more recommendations to how to solve these challenges.
So let's talk about another survey that LogicMonitor conducted. We talked to 300 individuals across our larger customers around what are the impacts of tools and how it is affecting outages in their environment and how downtime is occurring because of too many tools. First and foremost is that across all of the individuals we surveyed, availability is by far the most valuable commodity. So we're seeing that availability is so important to IT ops, and these outages and brownouts we're going to talk about that are occurring at a very alarming rate. So we looked across the globe of 100 individuals from different regions, mostly C-level, VP, and director level respondents throughout all verticals. Really those decision makers and what's top of mind for them as they're running their IT operations. So as mentioned, availability and performance is by far the most important thing keeping them up at night. 80% of the decision makers responded that these issues were more important than even security and cost effectiveness of their IT. So making sure that things are monitoring correctly and that the tools are being set up correctly so that the IT operations are running continuously and are highly available across the organization is really important to the business that these companies are running on. And the other part of this that makes the story interesting is that downtime is so rampant. So while 80% of the respondents are saying that the performance and availability were extremely important, the vast majority of the respondents were also saying that they've experienced significant downtime outages in the past 3 years. When we dive deeper into this, we see that we're distinguishing downtime in 2 different areas. Brownouts are really a degradation of performance. So with the end user seeing some sort of slowdown and delay in accessing that application or service. And on the reverse side, an outage is when there's a complete downtime and there's absolutely nothing available during that particular time period, when all of the systems or applications are down, so no users have access. And so some of this data here in the charts is interesting because 1/3 of all respondents said that they're seeing significant brownouts and outages in the last 3 years, and sometimes upwards of 4. And then even at a more staggering number, 58% of respondents said that they're seeing over 50 significant brownouts or outages per year. That's a striking number. But let me pass the talking stick to Taylor to see how we can avoid this.
So you saw that organizations are seeing outages occur that are highly critical to their businesses. But what is most interesting to me is that these are also largely avoidable. Over 50% of the outages or brownouts in their IT environments are actually avoidable situations. Here at LogicMonitor, companies come to us for help with addressing their downtime with their current monitoring tools. Different teams might select different tools for monitoring different systems or applications in their environment. And we actually work with large enterprise organizations to implement LM Vision to show these ops teams how to consolidate into a single pane of glass. Right now, LogicMonitor is working with a large enterprise organization who's running an on-prem ITIM monitoring tool for networking, another tool for monitoring storage, and another team is actually running Amazon CloudWatch for monitoring. On top of that, they have another tool set up just for monitoring their web applications. We often engage opportunities like these where we can displace upwards of 1, 2, 3, or even 4 tools at a time as we implement our LM Envision platform. Our single platform allows large organizations to realize the benefits of having a consolidated view of all their monitored IT information. And by collecting all the data in one platform, we can provide access to a single set of dashboards for all the IT devices in the organization. The consolidation helps the team start to understand the dependencies between these different systems and applications. So as one occurs in one area of the company, it may affect the other team, and these dependencies are now visible and easier to set up for proper alerting within a single solution. So at LogicMonitor, we help these customers running multiple monitoring tools consolidate into a single holistic view to trigger alerts and send the right notifications to the right people across the different departments to hopefully prevent future downtime and service outages. We're also seeing the financial impact of these downtimes and service degradations. For all the companies we've talked to who are having these frequent outages of more than 5 in the past 3 years, we can now see a good picture of the additional costs they're likely to incur to address these downtimes. All in all, it's about 16 times higher costs across these respondents. The staggering number is largely tied to the number of people it takes to really recruit to manage and troubleshoot these problems. So nearly the double amount of people it takes to solve the problems, but it also takes twice as long to fix the problems because of the tool sprawl. So not only is it expensive for these larger teams to spend more time troubleshooting the situation and look at the outages, but there's probably even more hidden costs when the root cause is found somewhere within the application or system or infrastructure, because that's probably affecting your bottom line as well. Now, what are the respondents saying as the causes of these outages, and what's causing the downtime? The two main causes we saw in the survey were network failures and usage spikes. A system or an entire section of the network going down is an obvious cause, but specifically an unpredictable spike in surges of end users suddenly using an application could create a brownout or a situation where infrastructure may go down because it's being overutilized. So how does investing in a solution like Element Vision create opportunities to prevent these? Well, Element Vision provides out-of-the-box capabilities for capacity thresholds. So when a threshold is exceeded, the ops teams can be immediately alerted with contextual information on what happened, so someone in IT ops can go resolve immediately. If a hardware fails or a software service simply goes down, Element Vision's monitoring alerts the responsible teams, but again, also shows the dependencies mapping of impacts between potentially other hardware, other services within the IT environment. This is a summary of what's happening today with the IT leaders at various companies on how downtime is affecting their business.
So all in all, LogicMonitor's Element Vision is a SaaS-based unified observability platform that enables today's digital enterprises to adopt cloud-ready operating model for effectively meeting key business demands with digital transformation. We provide clarity across hybrid enterprise IT, bring diverse IT ops and DevOps teams together to solve complex problems, and enable IT to innovate faster while improving operational efficiency to the critical IT services we deliver. Today, we talked about tool sprawl and the challenges and the risks associated with it. We talked about our recommendations and how Element Vision can really help in minimizing that tool sprawl so that we can have a single pane of glass across all of your IT ops data. Thank you so much for listening, and we will open the floor to questions.
Thank you guys so much for that. That was awesome. And I do have a few questions prepared for you. So do you have any advice for organizations looking to reduce the number of tools that they currently have?
So that is a great question, and we touched on a couple earlier, but I think there's a lot that people can do to reduce the number of tools at play without, causing that rebellion like we're trying to avert this whole time. So, something that kind of comes to mind is, and it sounds obvious, but people may not think about it. It sort of depends where you are in terms of your digital transformation and kind of the evolution of your ops teams, so to speak. So I guess, for people who are early in that process of adopting cloud and cloud native technologies, I think your life will be so much easier if you think about monitoring as a part of that whole process. So just inserting, just thinking about monitoring, because I guess, frankly, a lot of organizations that face problems with tools get there because monitoring is kind of an afterthought. It's kind of like bolted on right after, and is part of the reason that people keep throwing more tools and more tools after they're adopting those technologies. So if you're thoughtful about inserting monitoring as kind of a proactive approach into the whole process of adopting new technologies, you're going to be a lot better off and avoid kind of throwing those amount of tools, different tools, I guess, at the new technologies as your organization is developing.
And how does LogicMonitor really help to reduce downtime?
I can take that one too. That's also a really good question. So with reducing downtime, LogicMonitor actually does quite a bit. But let's first off talk about kind of what Taylor touched on is providing that holistic view. So when something goes down in one area of your infrastructure, whether that's the public or private cloud or, part of your on-premise environment, we're getting all of that into one single pane of glass. So by getting everything, all of that data in there, we're enabled to alert across all of the audiences, and the information can be consumed through LogicMonitor. So we're able to see that on a single pane of glass. And then we can send those alerts out to other tools and integrate, since we integrate directly with tools such as ServiceNow and ticketing systems or Slack or PagerDuty. And you send those notifications so that the tool owner gets the ticket or they get the alert and they know exactly what's happening. So our goal with LogicMonitor is to really give that whole view of the infrastructure, the on-premise infrastructure and the public cloud, and also to notify the people at the right time when those alerts occur. So when an infrastructure goes down, we want to make sure that there's a threshold in place for that situation and the right data points are being alerted upon so that everybody knows what's going on, and getting that holistic view will really help notify the end users at the right time.
All right. And lastly, what would IT ops look at to really judge application performance?
Okay, I'll take this one. So I guess in the past, IT ops could just monitor networks, servers, and fundamentally just view the health of the IT. But really, modern applications are just owned by so many teams because what powers the modern applications, all the microservices, cloud services, containers, but also probably a lot of the key services are hosted on-prem or in a private cloud. It really is now a shared responsibility for IT ops. So I really think having the right solution that not only shows you the health of your IT services, but also a way to actually import and visualize some of the key business metrics, number of orders per hour, number of calls per hour, whatever your main key KPIs might be. So you can actually keep track of overall business health and tie that in the same dashboards to fundamentally the services IT ops or owning, managing, visualizing. But also, if you think about the actual application that your company is running either internally or externally, each step along that end user journey is a set of different series, services, and likely metrics. So a common capabilities of synthetic monitoring or real user monitoring really provides a view for IT ops of not just knowing is the app up or down, but at each step of logging in, maybe adding to item to your cart, how long is this action taking, and determine that there's thresholds, these baselines to create metric alerts based off, so that if you see either your numbers are down or something's taking longer than expected, you can really correlate that to the IT services of maybe a disk is out of space, maybe a CPU is out, maybe the server's down, something with the networking or cloud as well. So just connecting all of this into what actually could be powering your applications.
Okay, that was great. Thank you guys so much again for your presentation. And if there's no more audience questions, I think that's all we have for today. Thank you to our audience for joining us. And thank you again to Taylor and Sabrina. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day. And as a reminder, the webinar will be available for on-demand viewing in about 24 hours. And with that, I think we're all wrapped up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.